The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. It was a cold morning in May, not May, but May, when Lord Henry Wotton strolled through the streets of London with his good friend Basil Hallward, who was an artist of some renown. They were on their way to visit Bazal, a studio in the country where he had been working on one of his greatest pieces. "You must come and see my Dorian Gray," said Basil to his companion. And Lord Henry, ever curious about anything that was aesthetically pleasing, readily agreed. Upon entering the studio, what they saw made them both gasp in surprise. On the canvas was a young man who appeared not merely beautiful, but who seemed to embody perfection itself. His skin was as smooth and unblemished as alabaster. His eyes sparkled with a heavenly light, and there was something about his expression that hinted at an otherworldly wisdom far beyond his apparent years. In a word, it was a masterpiece, and both men knew it. "He is even more beautiful than you've led me to expect," said Lord Henry, unable to take his eyes off the painting. "He haunts my waking thoughts and steals into my dreams. You have made him the ideal of beauty, Basil. I declare to you, he is perfect." Basil blushed. Flattered by the praise of such a connoisseur as Lord Henry, he explained that the model for the picture was a young man named Dorian Gray, who had come to him as a suggestion from Lord Henry himself. The portrait was merely an attempt to capture the essence of this extraordinary youth. Lord Henry, upon hearing this, looked over at the subject of the painting, who had been silent up until now. He was seated on a nearby sofa, absorbed in a book, and seemed completely unaware of the admiration being heaped upon him. "Mr. Gray," said Lord Henry, rising and bowing slightly, "you have the honor of being the most beautiful creature I have ever seen. I want to know if it is real or merely a clever trick of light and shade." Dorian looked up from his book and smiled faintly. "I am quite real, Mr. Wotton, though I confess I don't understand the object of your admiration. I have many faults, I fear." "On the contrary, my dear fellow, you have no faults that I can see," replied Lord Henry, scrutinizing him intently. "You're perfectly beautiful. There is not a flaw in your character." Dorian blushed slightly, embarrassed by the attention, and returned to his book. But Lord Henry was not finished with him yet. As they were leaving the studio, he turned back to address Dorian, who had followed them out of the room. "Youth is the season of optimism, my boy, but the dawn of manhood brings with it a certain amount of disenchantment. When you cast off the shackles of vanity and youthful folly, you enter upon a new life, a life of iron will and inflexible self-control." "I cannot tell you how much I disagree with you, Lord Henry," said Dorian, shaking his head. "Youth is the only time one can afford to be frivolous. Manhood is but a dreary tale of duty and dastardly deeds. My dear fellow, you mustn't allow yourself to be influenced by the somber views of old fogies like Basil here. Life is far too joyous a thing to waste on such nonsense. Care for the things that make life beautiful, for art and pleasure and all that is refined and dainty." Dorian listened to these words with rapt attention, his eyes shining with newfound purpose. He felt a surge of excitement course through him as he realized that perhaps life wasn't just about duty and drudgery after all. Perhaps there was more to it, something more akin to the beauty and wonder he had seen in Basil's paintings. As the days turned into weeks, Dorian became increasingly enamored with the idea of eternal youth and beauty. He began to spend less time with his friends, preferring instead to isolate himself in his room. Surrounded by books and art, he would gaze for hours at his own reflection in the mirror, admiring the perfection of his features and the smoothness of his skin. He felt invincible, as though he had discovered the secret to immortality. Meanwhile, Basil grew increasingly concerned about his friend. He noticed that Dorian had become pale and emaciated, and there was a haunted look in his eyes that he had never seen there before. One day, he confronted Dorian about it, only to receive a cold and distant reply. Dorian had changed, and Basil could feel that there was a darkness growing within him that threatened to consume him entirely. It was then that Basil decided to destroy the picture, believing that it was the source of Dorian's corruption. He took the painting into the garden and set it ablaze, watching as the flames devoured the canvas and the image of Dorian Gray burned away with it. But as the fire died down and the ashes grew cold, Basil realized that he had made a terrible mistake. For in destroying the painting, he had also destroyed the only thing that had given Dorian Gray hope for redemption. Now, without the picture to remind him of his own mortality, Dorian was free to indulge in his darkest desires without fear of consequence. And so it came to pass that Dorian Gray spent the remainder of his life in a perpetual state of sin and decadence, forever cursed to wander the earth as a living embodiment of evil. In the end, it was Basil's love for his friend that had led to his downfall, and it was Basil who paid the ultimate price for it. For as Dorian grew older, his beauty faded and his soul grew darker. He became a cautionary tale whispered in hushed tones among the aesthetes of London, a reminder that even the most beautiful of souls can be corrupted by the allure of eternal youth. And thus we see that it is not always in our nature to do good, but rather in our capacity for evil that we truly excel. This is the message of the Picture of Dorian Gray, a story of beauty, decadence, and damnation. As Oscar Wilde once wrote, the soul is dyed the color of its own passions. And what could be a more damning indictment than to say that a person as soul is the very thing that condemns them? For in the end, it is not the world that corrupts us, but ourselves. We are our own worst enemies, and our own desires are the chains that bind us. So let us remember the words of Dorian Gray and heed their warning. Let us not be seduced by the allure of eternal youth, nor let us indulge in the darker aspects of our nature. For in doing so, we may find ourselves trapped in a gilded cage of our own making, condemned to a life of sin and decadence. Thank you for watching this episode. If you enjoyed it, please remember to subscribe to our channel to get notified of our next release.